Welcome everybody to our RAS ACS virtual hangout today. We'll be speaking about applying to fellowship. I am Aubrey Schachter. I'm a general surgery resident at the University of Tennessee here in Memphis. I'm also the vice chair of the RAS membership committee work group. We have today with us two excellent surgeons who are going to give us their perspectives on applying to fellowship and supply some tips and tricks on becoming a great applicant and making it through the application process. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Erica Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell is a vascular surgeon at the University of Tennessee in Memphis. She is the Chief of Vascular Surgery and the Program Director for the University of Tennessee Vascular Surgery Program. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Centeno, who is a Trauma and Acute Care Surgery Fellow at the University of Colorado. Prior to his time as a fellow in Colorado, he was a general surgery resident at the University of Texas in Galveston. We're really happy to have you both here with us to give us some insight into the process of applying to fellowship. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having us.
Yeah, pleasure. And congratulations on applying to a fellowship program.
Awesome. So we're going to start out first with kind of talking about the pre-application process. So how do you set yourself up for success when approaching fellowship applications from a PGY1 through PGY3 standpoint? Dr. Mitchell, what would you say is the best way for a PGY1 to approach fellowship?
Well, I think the first thing you want to do is decide what you love. Because if you love what you're doing, it's not work, right? Every day that you go to work, it's something that you love. So really figure out what it is that you want to do for the rest of your life. And you may not figure that out in your first year nor your second year, but at some point you will figure it out. And once you find what sparks your interest, then hone in on it and get acquainted with the people in that specialty, the fellows in that specialty, the other residents interested in that specialty, and start, joining the club, right?
Awesome. Dr. Centeno, what do you think is the best time frame for a resident who is looking towards, they know they want to do a fellowship, when should they start kind of really focusing on meeting those goals and achieving those things? So what research to get involved in, the timeline for somebody applying to fellowship?
Yeah, I think that, if you identify early in your residency what you want to do as a specialty, then obviously start getting in touch with the faculty in your residency program that are in that specialty. For instance, in my case, trauma and acute care surgery. And so with them, you start identifying certain gaps in research within your institution or somewhere else. And then based on that, start to, come up with ideas and papers and stuff like that can help you kind of like get exposures in the national setting where you can go to present podiums or posters and whatnot. Even case reports and everything is important. And I think that's kind of like the big step. The other thing I would say is once you identify that that's what you want to do, at least I'm going to speak from my experience in that setting, get involved in the national organizations, be part. In my case, I wanted to do trauma. So I became a member of the Eastern Association of the Surgery of Trauma early as an intern. And then I would go to the meetings. And then when I was in the meetings, I would introduce myself or use another faculty from my program who was there to, hey, can I meet this person? And just kind of show my interest that way and then follow up and kind of stay in touch in that setting. Some of these organizations have mentoring programs and things that you can take advantage of that are actually going to give you experience and exposure to other programs and other figures nationally in that setting. And later on, when you apply, then you can speak about what you have done within that specialty to kind of say, well, I like trauma for all these reasons, but also this is what I have done. This is what I'm a member of and all things. And it shows commitment and into the specialty. So I would say that. But I also, at the same time, if you are an intern and you don't know what you want to do yet, it's okay to kind of navigate each specialty carefully and explore each one of them until you find the one that you like. To echo Dr. Mitchell, find something that you're going to fall in love with, that it's going to be your job, yes, but you're also going to love going and doing every day, because as surgeons, you invest a lot of time in it. And so if you don't like it, then you're going to end up hating everything about it.
Yeah. So to echo that, I would say have presence. So be present and have presence.
Perfect. What What would you say is a common mistake you see an applicant make, maybe even in their in their clinical time before they apply, that puts up a red flag for you saying, maybe this isn't an applicant that I would want in my program?
I'd say it's important that you get along and be supportive, because remember, 360, evaluations don't come from your peers or other physicians. They come from everyone. And so even when you're applying, if you're rude to the program director's coordinator, that's a problem. So, you have to be aware that you're sort of interviewing all the time. And so if you are interested in, say, for example, vascular surgery, which is my specialty, get engaged in when you're on the service and get engaged in research. Come into cases that are really, really cool and unusual, because just being present and letting them know about your interest and going that little extra mile is really important. It really shows that you're committed and that you're willing to go that extra mile. And that's what we want in our trainees, the people who will stay a little longer to take care of that really sick patient when it's necessary. In essence, what you're doing is you're joining the clan, you're developing the tools of the trade and the language, and getting to know the community.
It sounds like kind of one of the recurring themes through this conversation is that it's all about the people, and the clinical skills and all of that, it can be developed later on, but making those connections and getting to know people is really important.
Yes.
Okay, so moving a little bit forward on a timeline, as an applicant, when you're starting to fill out your applications and ask for your letters of recommendation, what's the time frame that you recommend that applicants follow in order to be respectful of their letter writers and make sure that they're well prepared to submit that application?
So I think that, most surgical specialties you apply when you're a fourth year resident. So usually around December or March, around that time. So I would say start early, identify those people when you become a fourth year, and just start have a conversation. Say, like, I'm interested. Hopefully by that time, they already know that you're going into that specialty. But, in that time, you're like, hey, my application is going to open in December, and I would like to have a letter of recommendation from you. And then work in that time frame, be able to provide your CV, because have it ready, because they're probably going to tell you right away, send me your CV, send me your personal statement, so they can kind of like look at you as an applicant and write a letter from that. They're obviously going to share some of the experience that they have had with you during residency, and that's important when they're writing the letter, to make a letter that is like personal, that shares information about you, and that shows your commitment to the specialty. And in terms of the time frame, I would say, if your application is in December, bring it up when you become a fourth year, and then kind of remind that person throughout those months subsequently, because surgeons are busy. It takes time for them to write letters. Some of them might be, hey, write me a draft of your letter and send me that with your personal statement and your CV. So you have to be ready for that, to be able to send it timely and give them time to modify everything and make it for you. But yeah, start early. That would be my biggest advice, because you don't want the application to open in December and then you're running in November to try to get the letters. You haven't talked to the person that is going to write the letter for you, and they're busy. And so they don't have time sometimes to write it at the time that you need it. And your application is not completed at the time that you have to apply.
So I would echo that and add that it's important that the people who write your letters know you, right? Because it's very hard to write a letter for someone you've never worked with.
Yeah.
And develop those relationships and rotate on those services. So if you know that you need a letter from your program director, or the program director of vascular surgery or trauma critical care, work with that person. If you don't have the opportunity to work with someone, for example, the chair, and you want a letter from the chair should know you for good reasons, obviously. But I would also suggest that you provide them a copy of your CV, and it must be in order and neat and tidy and all, but also your personal statement. And if not your personal statement, because sometimes that's kind of hard to create, at least a summary of kind of the key highlighted points that you want them to highlight for you. And this applies not only when you're applying for fellowship, but when you're applying for the American College of Surgery or American Surgical, whatever it is. If you're asking someone to write your letter for you, be respectful, provide them the information you want them to have. And oftentimes that it means writing a draft of the letter yourself that they can modify how they want. The easier you make it for them, the sooner they can get it out. And so do it early, remind them gently and professionally, but keep on them, or at least keep on their staff, but definitely early, because there's nothing more frustrating than having to write a letter the night before when inevitably as a surgeon you've got 1,000 things on your plate already, and one more thing is it probably will go at the bottom of your pile.
What would you say is an appropriate amount of time in advance to request a letter?
2 months.
2 months.
That's not too early, really. It's not. And when I sit on the admissions, I sat on the admissions committee, but now on the promotion and tenure committee, we are asking people way in advance for letters, because that we're all busy, right? We're not just sitting around waiting for people, to write letters for people.
Of course. Of
Yeah.
course. Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I did the same. Personally, my experience was like I did that. I started like in July, August as a PGY4, and I kind of like stay in touch with the faculty to like, not every month, but like maybe a couple months prior, I was like, hey, the application is in this time. I'm gonna send you everything this week. And I'll follow up with you. And sometimes you gotta follow up with their assistants or something, because they are the ones who control the schedule for some of the surgeons too. And so that's important to know.
Okay, excellent. Dr. Mitchell, can you tell us your thoughts a little bit on away rotations for residents and if they're beneficial, or if you find that they're not really helpful investment for that resident?
Yes. So I know that some programs weigh heavily on away rotations at their own institution. So it can either work your way or work against you. But you do have to understand, if you're going on an away rotation at another program that you'd like to get into, every single day you are being interviewed. So you cannot go there and be the party animal, and slack off and smart talk people, because then you won't be. You really want, so you really have to commit to it. So if you feel like that you can do that, then do it. But I don't think an away rotation gives you an edge, particularly if you don't perform well.
Dr. Centeno, what do you think applicants should look for when they visit a program, or if they're speaking with the current fellows? What questions should they be asking as they kind of evaluate if the program is a good fit for them?
I think when you talk to the fellows, it's your opportunity to ask all those questions, those personal questions about like, how are the faculty with you? What is the support you're having? How it's like, if you want to do research, how's been your experience and your ability to do research in this program? Because some programs sometimes say, oh, our fellows do a lot of research and everything, and you get there and the infrastructure is not there. And then you have to start everything from your own. And you only have like 1 or 2 years, maybe 3 years, depending on the fellowship that you are. And so, you're clinically busy. So you want to make sure that the infrastructure is there. I'd say, what support you get from your other faculty as well. In terms of like understanding, right? Like at that point, when you're a fellow, you're also a surgeon. And so like life happens. And sometimes you want to make sure that some of your attendings are going to be understanding that, you might have personal or family situations that, when you're a resident, it's different than when you're a fellow, slightly. So I think that trying to get a set of the head of the culture of the program, I think now that I'm like in my last year of fellowship, what I would say is like, sometimes we get to hyper focus on like, we want to go to place X and this is the most famous place for this and whatever. But then you interview there and then it might be not what you expected when you talk to the fellows. And then you fall in love with something else or some other program, and that's fine. Because at the end of the day, you want to find a program that fits for you. You're going to get your cases because they all have a requirement case log that they have to have. And if they meet that, the program is accredited to be able to be there. So you have to be able to identify that. I would say that try to get that sense from the fellows to see the culture of the program, how supportive it is, if you're interested in research, if the infrastructure is there, And something that people don't talk a lot, but I think is important, especially now when you are a fellow and you have like attending responsibilities and you move to a different city and life starts to occur, it's like check benefits. You know, what's the insurance situation like? Do they cover for your spouse? Do you cover for your kids or not? Do you have to pay for everything like that? Things as simple as parking. Some places charge $100 for parking every month. And if you move to an expensive city, right, then you are going to have to pay for rent, parking, you have to cover your insurance. And maybe you come from a place that your residency program, everything was covered. And now you're hit with reality. Now you're a fellow. So get those questions are, I think that's the time to ask the fellows for that. Most of the time, the interview per se won't include that in the when you talk to the faculties or program director. But I think when you talk to the fellows, it's important to have that. And people are afraid to ask those questions. But I always tell the fellow applicants when I'm interviewing them for like my current fellowship, it's just like, you didn't ask, but this is our current situation. This is our insurance work. This is our parking work. This is our 401k work. This is all those things, because you're an adult. You are already a surgeon, so you have to start thinking that way and start to think about things that are going to benefit you too.
Dr. Mitchell, when you are evaluating an application from a fellow, kind of a two-pronged question for you. What are the parts of an application that help discern one applicant versus the other? What's the best way for a resident to make their application stand out? And kind of alongside that, when you're reading the personal statement, what parts of the personal statement are the most important, or what stands out to you there?
Yeah, so I would, when looking at the personal statement, I'd say it's a sense of commitment and a sense of putting patient first. Because in essence, that's what we are in medicine for, right? To take care of patients. And so it's those little things that you can glean from a personal statement. And then I'd say from letters of recommendation, it's really about how this person has performed under stress, with their colleagues, in terms of entrustments. Those are the things that I'm really looking for. It's really a trust, commitment, and patient focused.
Dr. Centeno, what do you wish is something that you had known before you had started the process of applying to fellowship?
I think for my particular field, one of the things that I didn't know when I was in the application or kind of like in the interview process stuff is like the programs were very different. And what I mean by this is like, I thought, well, trauma acute care surgery, so everybody's just gonna be like, just gonna do trauma every day. But like in reality, some places are more. In my case, they were more like emergency general surgery heavy, or trauma heavy, or more ICU heavy. Like where I train in Denver Health, we do our own anything above the knee or proximal to the elbow. We do our own vascular anastomosis, or we do our own rib plating, our own thoracic cases, but some other places don't. So like you have to like be able to identify what are your like niches or like the areas that you probably didn't get when you were a resident or that you want to expand as a fellow. If you're going into a specialty that is kind of like an expansion of general surgery, such as trauma, and be able to get that. I wish I had known that some programs were different, because when I started the process, I went with the idea, it's like, oh, I like this university or I like this program. And when I interviewed there and I asked them like, how do you guys manage your traumas when they have a gunshot wound to an arm with a brachial artery injury? And they're like, oh, we call vascular. And I was just like, okay, fine. But like, I can do that as a trauma surgeon somewhere else. Like, I just want that little set of skills to be able to do it myself. And so if that's your expectation as a trainee, then, you're able to get that from that fellowship. And same from like other areas, I'm sure for vascular or other specialties, there are other areas, same, that you have to be able to identify what you want from it.
So I would say I would agree, because certainly there are some programs in vascular that are very heavy on endo, some programs like mine that are very heavy on vascular trauma, and pediatric trauma, and pediatric vascular trauma, and then but yet we're very weak on venous disease. So if you come to our program and you want to be the aortic guru of the world, this may not be the program for you, but Stanford maybe. So you have to figure out kind of what you want to be, but if you want to just kind of be a well-rounded surgeon in whatever field it is, then you want to go to a program that offers you everything, right? So those are things that you can tease out from case logs, you can tease them out from talking to the fellows, and you can certainly tease it out just from talking to the faculty as to what they do on a day-to-day basis.
Dr.
Yeah,
Mitchell, go ahead.
No, sorry. One thing that Dr. Mitchell brought up, and I think it's important, related to the previous question about asking the fellows, is like, the case logs. Sometimes asking the fellows, like, hey, how have your cases been in the last month? What have you done in the trauma service in the last month? And then some of them might be like, oh, we did an aortic, or like we did a venous injury, or we did this, or, we pack a liver, or, something around those lines. So in that way, you know that what they're telling you, oh, we're very busy trauma center. It's like, it actually matches what the fellowships are telling you versus like, oh yeah, we're very busy trauma, but the fellows are like, well, we just admitted like some patients with blunt trauma and we were in the ICU, just kind of like resuscitating them and calling IR and calling this. And then you kind of like have to be able to discriminate what you want based on that information. So I think that's important too.
Absolutely. Along those lines, how can fellows, once they have matched, make the most of their clinical experiences and their training, and really get the most out of their fellowship year or years?
I
was going to say very quickly, what I tell my fellows, what you put in, you get out. So, you're adults. This is your training period. I know how to do this already. You're here to learn. So it's really about what, you will get out what you put in. So it's your time to, try and engage in all the complex cases or the odd cases or things that you really are wanting to focus on when you graduate, and hone in on those skills and understand that this is the beginning of the iceberg, right? This is the beginning of your knowing what you know and don't know in vascular surgery or trauma surgery, or whatever it may be, because you will continue to learn even when you finish. So it's really providing you the foundation or scaffolding upon which you build.
I agree 100%. I was gonna go around the same lines. You have to be as involved as you want in the setting of like the surgeons, the attendings that work in your fellowship program. They already know what they already learned what they needed, and so at this point they're willing to share that with you and bring you into the cases and do everything. So stay engaged, be involved, know your patients. Offer, in case of trauma, unfortunately, and I'm sure in vascular is the same, some cases come in the middle of the night and you are like not there because you weren't on call. So sometimes I've been like, well, attending so-and-so who's usually like a black cloud and a very experienced surgeon. Hey, you're on call tonight. I'm not on call, but like if something comes in, I'll be in my house, just call me and I'll come in. And if you live by the hospital, I've done that. And you're able to get those experiences as well. Because sometimes cases come in and it's one or twice that you get of those in the year. And if you miss that opportunity, it's a big deal, especially during fellowship. So I'd say, you stay very engaged, involved, and try to show that you care about the patient, that you care about the specialty. And I'm sure that your faculties are going to be able to give you everything that you want.
Excellent. Along the lines of matching and starting fellowship, what advice do you have for applicants who may not have matched into their top choice of fellowship, or maybe even not the field that they were hoping to match into?
I would say it's not the end of the world. It may feel like the end of the world. And sometimes things happen for a reason, believe it or not. And later on in life, you'll look back and say, that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And this is why I am doing what I am, because of this and this and this and this. But if you are still interested in whatever specialty it is that you want, look at the gaps that maybe you missed in your application, or something that you didn't have, or the programs that you applied to that were maybe outside of your reach, and try again. But make sure that the year between now and the time you apply, it's purposeful. Because if you don't change your CV or your application one bit, why would you expect to get in the second time? So you really, really have to decide whether you want to make that extra effort. And sometimes it's that last 20% that takes 80% of the effort. But it's, go for your dream, because if you don't, you'll never get it, right?
Absolutely. I guess that brings us to our kind of last questions here for each of you. Do you have any final advice on words of wisdom for residents who are in the application process or considering fellowship, or perhaps even those who are about to start fellowship on how to excel and be a great fellow?
I would say in the application process, don't get distracted by the noise of what everyone else is doing. Because you can get really nervous thinking like, oh my goodness, that person has this and this and this and this. They're so much better than me, blah, blah, blah. Everyone's saying the same thing about you. So just focus on what you can change, and all you can change is what is in front of you. And just be positive about it, and, and shine. And, this is your time to kind of let people know, what you are, where you want to be, and how you can make a difference, because no one else can speak for you than yourself, right?
Yeah, I think that during the application process, agree, don't get distracted by other people, what other people are going through, especially if you have a co-resident that is applying to the same specialty that you are. The other thing is like prepare well for your interviews. Make sure you know like the place that you're interviewing, and because if you accepted that interview, you have a responsibility to learn about that place and be able to kind of like respect their time the same way they're offering you that opportunity to be there. Also, like, don't be afraid to reach out to programs. If you want to go to a place, and you never know, maybe your application went missing, or like they didn't see it or something. So reach out, email the program, be like, hey, I'm really interested in your program for the following reason, not just like I'm interested in your program. And, after that, if they're able to offer you an interview, then again, prepare for it and be ready. And once you match, then start early. There is this handbook that came in from the Society of Critical Care Medicine and the AAST a couple years ago about trauma fellows, kind of how to prepare for fellowship. And they did mention a lot about like communicate early with your fellowship, engage with the fellows that are going to be there. And then by the time you start, you might be already in some projects, or you might know what's going on, or you might know the schedule. So like in that way, it shows that you want to be there. It shows that you want to learn about the specialty, and it shows your commitment to it. So like, I think that's one thing. And then once you start, just like give your 200%, I would say. So you can it's a very short time. It flies by very quickly. And by the time you're almost done, you're like, oh, I wish I had done this. I wish I had learned that. The opportunity is there. So just take advantage of everything that you have in that fellowship program, because you're going there for a reason. Yeah,
that's great advice. And have fun. And then don't forget about your spouse or your partner or your family, because they didn't sign up for this. And so you do have to pay attention, because it's very easy to get into this vortex of training, and you just like doing these great cases, and then your loved one at home is just kind of like lonely. So, be sure the loved ones in your life feel loved too.
I agree.
Awesome. I think my key takeaways from our talk has been, work really hard as a resident, take really good care of your patients, show your enthusiasm, show your investment, and approach every day like you have something excellent to learn. And that all kind of will put you on the right path to getting the fellowship that you want. And then those habits will continue on in fellowship to help you get the most out of your time, that very, very short time that you have with some excellent teachers.